micronutrients or macronutrients, how we can differentiate between them. Is the weight is the criteria? Yes, it is. This is Dr. Pankaj Kumar, your mentor for today's sessions. And in today's sessions, we are just going to discuss about the different types of micro and macronutrients, right? So we will be talking about what are the essential elements, and we will also discussing about that what are the deficiency symptoms with some of the macro and micro elements and how the elements are going to be absorbed or the nutrients are going to be absorbed. So that is the things what we are going to discuss. First thing first, let's talk about what is the essential elements. You know, there are three criteria that decides any element to be essential. What are they? The very first thing, it should be absolutely necessary for the growth and reproduction. Number two, its function is very specific, right? And it cannot be replaced by any other functions, or it cannot be replaced by the function of any other element. Okay. And thirdly, it is directly involved in the metabolism of the plant, right? So these are the three most important criteria to decide any of the essential elements. Okay. So as many as there are 17 essential elements, nickel being the latest one which has been included in this particular elements. So carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and altogether there are 17 essential elements. Okay. Now we will discuss that how we can divide the essential elements into two categories, what we call micro elements and second what we call macro elements. Now how we can differentiate? Of course we can differentiate on the basis of the dry weight of the respective amount that is present in any plant. Okay. For instance, if you talk about the macronutrients, in case of macronutrients, the concentration lies between 1 to 10 milligram per gram of dry weight. So when it is there, we call it as a macro. But suppose if it is less than 1 milligram per gram of dry weight of plant, then we call it as a micronutrients. Okay. So some of the examples of micronutrients are what we call iron, manganese, copper, molybdenum, zinc, boron, chlorine, right? So these are the example of the micronutrients. Okay. Now let's talk about that how we can divide the nutrients on the basis of their respective mobility. So there are two types can be recognized. One, the mobile elements, and second, the immobile elements. Mind it, these is largely based on their respective molecular weight. So what happens, the element which have a larger molecular weight or comparatively larger molecular weight, right? So they are actually immobile, and which have a lesser molecular weight, they are actually mobile. Okay. So the immobile elements, their symptoms first appear in the younger leaves. For instance, the symptoms of sulfur is going to occur in the younger leaves. The symptom of iron, that is first appear in the younger leaves. But on contrary, if you talk about the mobile element, for instance, take an example of nitrogen. In case of nitrogen, what happens? Their symptom first appear in the older leaves. So that is how we can categorize between the mobile and the immobile elements, right? Now let's talk about the deficiency symptoms of some of the element. So we are going to discuss some of the key, and nitrogen is one of them. So just keep in your mind that what are the important aspects from NEET perspective you have to memorize as far as these elements are concerned. Number one, in what form the plant used to take these elements. Number two, what is their key role. Number three, what is their key deficiency symptoms. So these are the only 3 points that is you need to know from the NEET perspective. For instance, take an example of nitrogen. You know, nitrogen is primarily obtained in the form of nitrate from the soil by the plants. Okay. And they have a key role in the synthesis of chlorophyll, nucleic acid and protein. And they are essential for growth, photosynthesis and cell division. One of the important deficiency symptoms of nitrogen is that the plant is going to suffer from chlorosis. And we have already discussed that symptoms appear first in the older leaves than in the younger leaves. Okay. So as a result of deficiency, what happens? There is going to have a late flowering, stunted growth, purple color in shoot surface. So these are some of the features. Okay, have a look at this plant. You can see there that this is actually a plant with a nitrogen deficient, and this is a plant with a normal plant. So you can see that how this is going to be a chlorosis. The patches of chlorosis is actually visible over here. Okay. Similarly, if we compare the growth, you can see there. So this is the nitrogen deficient plant with a stunted growth. Okay, but here the plant with a normal growth. Right? Let's talk about the another element, what we call sulfur. In case of sulfur, what happens? They are obtained in the form of sulfate. Okay, they are constituents of ferredoxin and several coenzymes, and they are very essential for the nodulation in case of legumes. Okay, but mind it, the symptoms is going to appear first in the younger leaves, and here it again become chlorotic followed by the anthocyanin pigmentations. Root become very extensive, stems become hard. So these are the features of sulfur deficiency, right? Let's talk about one more, and that is calcium. Now you know calcium is going to obtain in its ionic form like this. They are the chief constituents of the cell wall in the form of calcium pectate, you know very well. Calcium is also involved in the formation of a spindle fiber. So we can say they participate in the cell division as well, right? And they are potent activator of enzyme called phospholipase, ATPase and so on. Okay. So what are the deficiency symptoms? The symptoms are the decomposition of the root epidermis, right? Necrosis of the young meristematic region. That is the most important one. What is the meaning of necrosis? The meaning of necrosis is the dying of the cell. Okay. So you see, the growth of the tip of a plant is actually dependent upon the calcium. So naturally, when there is a deficiency of calcium, the growth is going to hamper, and eventually it results into the development of necrosis patches. Okay. One of the another important things regarding the deficiency symptom is the wither tip effect. So these are the characteristic features as far as the calcium deficiency is concerned, right? So have a look at this. So this is the calcium deficient plant. Okay. So they are characterized by bushy appearance, small young leaflets and necrotic leaves. So this is how we can see about the calcium deficient plant, right? Let's talk about some microelements. For instance, here I have chosen zinc. Zinc is obtained in the form of ionic form. They are required in the synthesis of tryptophan, and they are activator of several enzymes like carbonic anhydrase and so on. Okay. And what is the deficiency symptom? The deficiency symptom is the shortening of internodes, right? And then there is going to have intervenal chlorosis. Okay, mind it that there are different types of chlorosis. Okay, so if I talk about, suppose this is a structure of a leaf. Okay, so there is a different part, right? So this part, what we call lamina or laminar chlorosis, that is going to occur due to nitrogen. Okay, then within them there is going to have a, this is part what we call intervenal. Okay, so intervenal chlorosis is going to occur due to zinc. Okay, and there is one venal chlorosis. This is what we call venal chlorosis, right? And venal chlorosis occur due to deficiency of iron. So these are three things, right? One more thing I would like to say, that deficiency of nitrogen is very much similar to sulfur also. So sulfur is also going to show chlorosis, and in case of deficiency of sulfur also, the chlorosis happens in case of lamina only, right? So these are some of the things what we see in case of chlorosis. Okay, fine. Let's talk about one more, and that is molybdenum. So molybdenum is obtained in the form of MOO2. They participate in the nodulation in legumes, and they are the part of enzyme called nitrate reductase that primarily convert the nitrates into nitrites. Okay, so if the molybdenum is going to be deficient, what will happen? They will lead to chlorosis. Nitrogen fixation is going to be reduced and shoot growth die back. That is a typical disease that happens due to deficiency of molybdenum. Okay, so this is all about as far as deficiency symptom is concerned. So deliberately I have taken only the 5 elements, but let me tell you that whatever the character or the deficiency symptom that is given in your NCERT textbooks, that is sufficient. You need not require to go beyond that as far as your the competitive exams NEET is concerned. Okay, so that's why I have just restricted to 5. I have given you some of the tips that what are the key area which need to be covered as far as the individual elements are concerned. Okay, now let's discuss how the salts are going to be absorbed or the minerals are going to be absorbed. We know very well that minerals are going to be absorbed from the soil, and in case of if you compare the concentration of soil and the root, in case of root the salt concentration is high, so naturally the salt has to be pushed against the concentration gradient. So that's why this absorption of salt is an active process. Okay, though classically we divide it into active and passive process absorption, but let me tell you that passive is just a classical things and it is not the accepted one. So we will concentrate our discussion only the active theory, that the salts are going to be absorbed actively, not passively. And one of the most important theory that is given for active absorption is actually the cytochrome pump theory. Okay, and protein carrier concept. But out of these, the most accepted one is the protein carrier concept. So we will concentrate only on the protein carrier concept. Right? So have a look at this diagram. Just you see. So have a look at this diagram. So this is a plasma membrane, outer side of the plasma membrane, right? And these are the membrane, these are the elements. So these elements are going to bind to the plasma membrane. Okay. So once it binds, then what happens? It goes to the inside. Okay. And how it goes to inside? By forming the ion carrier complex. So once it's come inside, what happens? That elements are going to be released, and now it become inactive. So it again become activated with the help of energy. So that's why we say it is an active process. Okay. So again it is ready to take a fresh amount of elements, and thereby it will again carry out from outside to the inside. This is how the entire the absorptions of minerals are going to happen. Okay. Now, which carrier protein is the most abundant one? The most abundant carrier protein is actually what we call is a lecithin. Lecithin is the most abundant carrier protein that is observed in majority of the cases. Right? So let's talk the last thing, that what are the factors that affect the absorptions of minerals. Okay. So the factors are, one is the temperature. So what happens? Rate of absorption of mineral salt is directly proportional to the temperature. That means if the temperature is high, absorption is going to be high. Very simple, because at higher metabolic rate, more ATP is formed, eventually helps in more and more absorptions. pH. What happens in general? Decrease in pH leads to increase in anion absorptions. That is important. And increase in pH, that means that is a basic pH. There is an increase in cation absorptions. So acidic pH is going to favor the anionic absorptions, and the basic pH is going to favor the cation absorptions. Okay. Now in the presence of oxygen, the active mineral salt absorption is decreased by decrease in oxygen, because more and more oxygen, more ATP is formed. If more ATP is formed, the absorption will be more. And aging, of course, salt absorption is going to decrease as a result of the process of aging. So this is all what I have to discuss for today's sessions. That's all. Thank you.